Hi everyone, I'm Usman here, and this is my brother Masa here. He'll be interviewing me, and I'll be discussing Apple's autocorrect and predictive text system.
Alright. So the first question is, how do you use autocorrect and predictive text in your everyday life? And how have they changed the way you communicate?
So I personally use autocorrect and predictive text all the time. I use them for like texting friends and family. I use them for writing academic papers to make them like more grammatically sound. And I use them a lot for writing professional emails. But this ends up making me sometimes accept wording that sounds generic and a lot less like me just for convenience. In a video we watched in this course by Lauren Klein, she makes the point that data systems should not be treated as neutral and so data systems should not be treated as neutral, and predictive text guesses from existing language patterns rather than actually knowing what I want to say. So we should second guess when we're when we're accepting an autocorrection or accepting predictive text, because we need to make sure that's actually what we want to say instead of just treating it as gospel. Subramaniam also makes a point. She was an author of a reading we read in this course. She makes a point that technology and society shape each other. And Subramaniam and many other authors made that point, and that connects to this because autocorrect's idea of correct language comes from social standards rather than technical rules that we have to follow. So we're essentially making those rules of autocorrect, and again, we shouldn't just treat them as gospel. We should second guess what we're autocorrecting and using predictive text for. In my case, like, convenience manages my behavior because I just accept suggested wording rather than fully expressing myself just because it's easier.
Alright, and the second question is, what does autocorrect treat as correct language, and how can that privilege certain names, dialects, or cultural expressions over others?
Yeah, this question is really useful for me. In growing up in a Pakistani household where I spoke a lot of Urdu with my family and my siblings, I believe autocorrection and predictive text is just trained on standard English and common names and common words in English. They're just accepted over cultural names, cultural slang, multilingual dialect, and multilingual slang. For example, in my case, I write a lot of Urdu in English because it's a lot easier to just write down the English keyboard when I'm speaking with my parents and my siblings. But autocorrect and predictive text butchers that, and it changes that into English words closest to whatever slang or cultural name I'm trying to say. And that just makes it an inconvenience. Ruha Benjamin, in a reading by Ruha Benjamin, she makes a point that racial differences are not natural facts that technology observes, but it's something that technology reinforces through ideas of what is normal to what is standard, because it's trained on the English, like just the standard English language. So technology is not racist itself, it's just the training data and how it's designed. In another article, or in another podcast called Are Robots Racist? They make the same point that technology doesn't need it doesn't need to be trained on racial stereotypes to create these racial biases. Um, Essentially, the robot is not racist. It's just trained on data that is standard to it. So, in my case, like how I brought up writing Urdu and English, it's simply just trained on the English language. So I have to manually put that into the dictionary for it to not autocorrect or predict that text. Um, so to connect this to the overall public, some users' languages are recognized automatically, while others, like myself, have to repeatedly correct the system or input into the dictionary.
Question 3 is, how can autocorrect and predictive text influence the way people express gender and other parts of their identity?
So people often express their identity through names, pronouns, and cultural language. From a reading in this course, Judith Butler questions the idea that gender categories are not simply neutral. From this, gender categories are very broad, and technology fails to accurately predict those gender categories because they're just not simply neutral. This connects similar to the point I made about Subramaniam and the point that Subramaniam made, that technology and society shape each other. So yeah, incorrect pronouns, changed names, or expected gender wording is just something that the system fails to recognize for others, and it butchers their identity.
Alright. The fourth question is, why does autocorrect seem objectively correct? And how can users resist or reimagine it when it does not represent them?
So autocorrections and predictive text, they appear instantly and they appear confidently because it's generated by a computer. So in my case, I assume that I'm the one making the mistake when those corrections are made. I guess this goes back to Subramaniam and the other authors that wrote that article, that society and technology shape each other. It helps challenge the idea that technical judgment is separate from like social values. Technical judgment still comes down to it still comes to human decision and human dictionaries and what we as humans design the system to predict. So as humans, we can add the slang, cultural wording, multilingual slang to the dictionary, so we still have authority over these systems, and we can use that to combat the incorrect corrections autocorrect and predictive text is making. So we still have authority, and it uses our data that we input into it as correct autocorrections and predictive text in the future.